So a little bit more unfortunate news for Xbox fans, and listen, like for me anyway, this was something that I already kind of knew. It doesn't really take a genius to figure out 2 and 2 is 4. Don't argue with me, it's 4. Trust me, I double checked. And at the end of the day, Microsoft is gonna probably just continue to follow this route. Now, could Microsoft change their stance later on? Sure, because we've seen them change their stance numerous times already. So we already kind of have that there to look at and say, okay, well, yeah, they changed courses, at this particular point, at this particular point, at this particular point. I mean, at one point, their stance was outspend Sony on exclusives and, have a bunch of exclusives for your console. So that certainly changed. And then it went from, let's try out some of these games on PlayStation to everything going day one on PlayStation. So yeah, we do kind of have these things to go on before, and now it's like a little bit worse than ever. But anyway, if you're an Xbox fan and you were kind of holding out hope that maybe Microsoft wouldn't wouldn't launch their games day and date on Xbox and PlayStation or whatever, I got some bad news for you. They're indeed launching their games day and date, and it's going to continue to be that way because Xbox developers are reportedly, quote, thrilled to release their games on PlayStation 5. So according to that, the warning is there is no reason to suspect that they're going to stop that anytime soon. So, again, what really kind of bugs me sometimes, I think, is when you see Xbox fans pretend like they don't care, right? It's like, man, you definitely care, right? Like, because the way that you can tell that they care is like I'm on social media a lot and I'm scrolling through X or whatever, and you see people go, oh, Death Stranding 2 got rated for PC. Oh, man, they're really kind of making the gap there a little bit shorter between putting their games on PC. And it doesn't take a genius to look at the fact that Kojima owns the IP. Also, the first game went to PC 7 months later. We're already at the 5-month mark, so probably the same type of deal happening there. And realistically, 6 months to a year, that's not such a bad deal. You're going to get all your sales up front, and the people that are super interested. If you really wanted that game that bad, you're not going to wait around that long anyway. But anyway, over the last 18 months or so, Microsoft has pivoted to releasing games on rival platforms like PlayStation, while the reaction to the move has been pretty much negative. Within the community, it sounds as though Xbox developers at large are pretty pleased with the decision. Talking with 404 Media, Bloomberg's Jason Schreier spoke about the situation and how, quote, a lot of these studios are thrilled that they get to release their games on PlayStation. Schreier hinted at sales pressure being a core reason why the teams are happy to get their games out there on PlayStation. Quote, a lot of these Xbox first-party games are put on Game Pass, which means they're not selling as much because people could just subscribe and get them for much cheaper than they would if they bought them. That complicates the math for a lot of these studios. A lot of game studios are now actually thrilled that they get to release their games on PlayStation, which is a recent phenomenon that's been happening in the last year or so. So, coming off the back of the recent report that Microsoft is now aiming for 30% profits for its Xbox gaming division, also via Schreier, that makes a lot of sense, as the quote suggests game sales on Xbox are likely being impacted by Game Pass, so the extra revenue brought in by PS5 sales could go to helping the studios hit any internal targets that are being set. Of course, there's also the fact that game developers just like as many folks as possible to experience their creations. We've been seeing this being touted as a positive for the multi-platform push on multiple occasions, so it makes sense that a lot of Xbox teams would be happy to get their games to more players again. If you're a developer, you probably want your game to be played and bought, and just seeing the Game Pass stuff probably isn't very thrilling to you as a fan, unfortunately. And and I can't really blame you that, you know what I mean? It's like you see how a lot of the people are kind of reacting to a lot of the news and things like that. It's kind of a bit strange for me anyway. I think I look at it and I just go, Microsoft, they have these insane margins, but people also have to remember is, look, there's certain games, like let's just take Hellblade 2 for example. I'm not like throwing that game under the bus. It's an okay game, nothing special, but that's the game that they chose to show off with the Xbox Series X, and that game didn't wasn't played by a lot of people, even though it was on Game Pass. Didn't sell well, even though it was on Game Pass, and it was also on PC. And then it went to PlayStation and never charted, didn't sell, didn't do anything. That game, I don't think, helped at all being on a different platform, right? There's just certain games that aren't going to sell well. And I think that's like one of them. There other stuff like Pentiment, Hi-Fi Rush, their RTS games, Flight Simulator, whatever the case may be. These games, Indiana Jones didn't sell well. There's a lot of stuff that honestly didn't sell well. And so, when you look at it and you just kind of see from, the different point of view and things like that, hey, these games just aren't going to do extremely well, no matter where they're at, and I think like you have to understand for a game to be ported, that's costing money. So I think I would probably wager a good amount that some of these games that were ported or whatever were never actually they weren't they never recouped the cost for that. So again, we'll see how this continues to go and how gamers kind of react to these things. But for me anyway, it doesn't really come as a surprise that they're not going to change their direction right now. Again, I think that could change at any particular point over the course of the next months or years or whatever the case may be. I know people probably won't believe that. They go, no, Microsoft is, they're going to do what they're doing, and that's just the way that it is. I don't necessarily buy into that, because I think that they changed courses far too often to just kind of be stuck at the one particular way or whatever the case may be. So in the future, I think they might go, hey, well, let's sell off Xbox. Like if you were to ask me what I would hope that Xbox would do is maybe sell off or spin off the actual Xbox and let it kind of stand on its own, because I feel like it could, in particular, if they were able to get things going for like the future or whatever the case may be, with Microsoft and the gamers and things like that. Like, hey, let's just have a console that's like this beastly console that people want. Let's have exclusives that people want. I could see them doing something like that. Like, it wouldn't shock me to go out there and have a situation like that where something like that is actually going on. So I don't know. It's like, what do you guys expect though? Do you guys ever expect them to kind of change course, go back the direction or whatever? Like, here's the thing, right? I'm sure that from the outside, like, a lot of people make it sound like, hey, let's go ahead and have a our games on everything. How great is that? But I think that really defeats the purpose, devalues your console. There's just a lot of different things out there that could happen. And for me, I think that it would really kind of take a bit of the the onus off of Microsoft if they had maybe sell off some of the bigger stuff. I personally would sell off if I were to like spin off the Xbox thing. I would keep all the main stuff, the Turn 10s, the Playgrounds, the Ninja Theories, all that kind of stuff, the Halo Studios, build those up, and I would dump and sell off and get my money back for like ZeniMax and Activision, because I just don't see those as being very big, or you know what I'm saying, or not that they're not big, but it's like I feel like those were so costly that it forces you to put your games everywhere, whereas the other games, I don't really feel like that's the case, right? It's like I don't really think that was something that they have to do. So I feel like they could kind of more or less do what Sony does or do what Nintendo does with just those other developers. And again, it's funny because when they were originally buying Activision, I thought, and I'm sure a lot of other people thought, and you can let me know in the comments, that hey, they would just let Call of Duty pay for all the other exclusives that they're getting, right? Like, that would have been really cool to see, and I would have loved to see how like that turns out and stuff like that. But again, we'll see how that works out. Maybe Microsoft does something, maybe they don't. I would love to see Microsoft kind of work something out where fans can be happy and have some exclusives and things like that in the future. But you guys might feel a little bit differently to me. I don't know. I find it hard to believe. I also find it like it's weird because, like I said earlier on X, almost every post that I saw was some Xbox fan talking about Death Stranding 2 going to PC. And the only reason why you would talk about stuff like that is if you're secretly deep down pissed off that your games aren't exclusive anymore, right? And this is what I'll say on the whole Death Stranding thing. The first one went to PC within 7 months, 7-8 months. I wouldn't expect this one to be the same. It's owned by Kojima. You know, if this new Ghost game goes in under a year, then I would say it's time to worry. But until that point, I think, you know, Sony has no reason to not stay the course. We'll see how it all ends up. But let me know what you guys think. I'll link this in the description. Rack 'em up. Have a great day. Thanks so much for joining me. Crab Gamer out.